preacher was a little less long-winded today, so I think we'll have I don't know what to do with a full Bible class hour, but I've got a long lesson, so I think I'll figure it out. We started by talking about making the case for evangelism. We are going to be looking at some challenges today. I assure you, this is not going to be an alliterated list. Wednesday night's class is, but this one's not. But I want to look at some challenges. And I want to start with a story that I told, so some of you may have heard it as a Wednesday night devotional some months back. I did not realize until I was able to run down some more information about it. O.J. Russell is the one that wrote about this. This is purported to be a true story. And what was said is that the names were changed to protect the guilty. And it had to do with a congregation that had built a new building. And as a part of that building project, you know what goes along with that, or we're going to see about that in the next few years, that you build obviously it's pristine, looks great, as it is. We build a new house, and of course with that come furnishings, and a lot of times what will happen is that members will participate and give various things that will help to beautify and to make that just something that everybody can take pride in. Well, in this building project that occurred, they, among other things, two of the donated items were two, what do you call those plants? They're not ficus. Is it ficus? Ficus plants? Is that the decorative tree?
Fig.
Huh?
Ficus.
I think it's a ficus is what it was, I think. Yeah, so they're potted plants. So if you can envision that in your mind, sitting up in the front. Fig would be good in a church building, wouldn't it? I mean, that's a very biblical tree. But anyway, I think it was ficus trees. And they were up there at the front, and about 2 months after they had their first service in the building, those plants disappeared. Gone. And so, as you might expect, with there not being any kind of warning about this happening, they began to make announcements. The elders were up and saying, "If you have taken the ficus plants, will you please return them?" It was in the bulletin every week, our ficus trees are gone, can you please help us find those? It was the topic of conversation at church. People going, who took the ficus plants? Maybe it was a visitor, maybe somebody popped in off the street. I don't know what, I like those ficus. God, I'm glad you're gone. So all that's going on, right? And it keeps going, and 2 months, more than 2 months, every bulletin, there's not an announcement that's made. They're not just talking about it at church, they're talking about it at home. One of the members decided that he was going to really put this to bed, and after yet another announcement was made about it, this is what he wrote. Again, this is true. "We have heard a great deal about the missing pot plants. For 2 months at every service, announcements have been made, and people have earnestly looked for that which is lost. For years we have known that sheep have strayed from the flock. Prodigal sons are away from worship, and the Bible declares that they are lost. Each soul missing today is more valuable than the whole world. And yet we have not heard one announcement or have seen any anxious concern shown for Mary Smith and John Brown or Sam Jones," I'm assuming these are made up names, "whose eternal welfare may hang on our concern. If we had put forward 1/10 the energy in locating the lost souls of this flock as we have those lost pot plants, surely angels in heaven would rejoice." Now, I haven't seen that at Lehman. I have seen similar kinds of things everywhere else I've ever preached. Now, you may know things that might in some way compare to that here. And it's easy for us to fall into that trap. Why is it easier for us to show concern for pot plants that go missing than lost souls that were once here and now aren't here? Well, I mean, I think there's a plausible explanation, isn't there? What is it? And if you're thinking, it's not an indictment because you're not spiritual people. You're more worried about plants than you are people. Why? I
think when it comes to like tangible items, people feel like they have some power over that. With people's actions, we feel power.
Okay, I think that's a great distinction. It's easier to control an inanimate object than it is a person. We're not in the control business of people anyway. The Lord doesn't make anybody do something. I think along with that, though, it's easy for me to look up at the front and say, you know, I swear I'm oriented every week, and they're not there, and I want to know. And it's more subtle when it's, you know, you think about the larger that we are, it's easy for somebody to fall through the crack, and it's challenging for us to remind ourselves. I think I used this illustration somewhere about how successful they were in trying to promote the famine problem in Ethiopia. Didn't I said that, maybe not in this class, but in a class, and that's because you see those distended stomachs and you see those poor, malnourished bodies, and you can see it, but you can't see a lost soul by looking at them. Especially, remember what we said in our first lesson, is they may not be hard-edged and rough-looking. They may be very decent-looking people, but they haven't done what the Lord says do to become His child, and so we can't see the impact of their lostness. Yes, sir?
Well, I think it comes up every now and then, am I my brother's keeper? Well, in reality, yes, we are. But as far as missing people, I think each one of us, and I'm speaking for myself now, but I don't think any of us are much different in this perspective. We got lives.
Mm-hmm.
We're wrapped up in our lives.
Yeah.
And we come to church and we sit down, and people that are in our general area, we get used to those people being there, and if they're not there, we notice it. And weeks go by, and then we wonder, where did they go? And months go by, and we wonder, where did they go?
Well, a year goes by, and we go, whatever happened to what's his name? What was her name?
And while we had the impact, the opportunity to the impact,
That's right.
they were saying, where are they?
That's right.
It's a lot easier to look for a plant than a person. They
Well,
don't
sure.
talk back.
What's that?
They don't talk back.
They don't talk back. They don't give excuses.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
you don't have to have any fear
That's
looking
right.
for a plant.
That's right. Now, and you're hitting on some great ideas of where we're going today. Yes, sir.
I think to some degree too, this is another example of how the world has infiltrated our thinking, and that is, we hear out in the world too much. Well, we have free will. We don't need to influence. We don't need to tell somebody how they're to live their lives. So if somebody disappears, then we think, well, they know
They made their
that
choice.
they made the choice, and we ought to respect their choice.
That's right.
Now, we may not really believe that in the discussion, but I think that allows us to let them go without interfering in their lives.
Yeah, it makes us feel better.
Right.
Right, and we don't have to get into that uncomfortable interchange with them. And meanwhile, they may feel better here, but they're not going to feel better ultimately if we don't step in. Now, I say all that to say there are internal challenges, and I want you to keep in mind that we're going to be struggling with those internal challenges of being properly motivated, of keeping tuned in, and of not thinking like the world, to make sure that we always care, and that we don't let folks slip through the cracks, and that we're always on the lookout. And yet we're talking about evangelism, that there are, I see you, and I'm not trying to blow smoke at you, but if you're in here and you're committed to studying evangelism, you're saying, at least on some level, I'm at least fighting that challenge that's inside of me, and I desire to do that, to reach out, make sure that nobody gets left behind spiritually. Now, I don't want to discourage you. In fact, I'm trying to empower you. You're going to face some external challenges in evangelism. And I think that's the easiest way for us, because we're trying to build a fire under all of us, to get out and to share the gospel with people. But here's what's going to happen. There are going to be some challenges in evangelism that we've got to be ready to confront and equip ourselves to deal with. And they're going to really fall into three categories. And that's what I want to highlight for you, and that's why I want to know if you can see this. You're going to help me with this. There are challenges on at least three fronts before we get somebody in the water. There's a whole new set of challenges that we face once they become children of God, but you're going to face some challenges along at least 3 mile markers or 3 posts along the road to trying to get somebody to become a Christian. And as you see what they are, there are going to be some challenges, and I think you'll agree with me. Is it a challenge to get somebody to want to study the Bible? Yeah. If you get somebody to sit down with you, are there some challenges that you face in conducted a study. You know, maybe you haven't conducted a Bible study yet, but you can understand how in doing that you're going to run into some speed bumps, right? And you get all the way through the study. This part right here is exhilarating, but it's anxiety-inducing. It's really a very pivotal point, and you can get somebody all the way. You get somebody to study. You can be through the study, but then getting it from the study to one making the decision to become a child of God. There's some challenges in that, and what I want to do is I want to highlight what some of them are, and then I want to deal with them. Okay, so that's kind of where we're going in our class today. You should have a worksheet. If you don't, have we had several come in that want a worksheet? I think it'll get kind of passed out to you. So just kind of raise your hand, and there's some sheets up here. We'll try to get it to you. All right, so let's deal with that first part. What do you think are some of the challenges that we face in getting somebody to study with us?
Well, like I think there's challenges with me, the person, and then the other person.
So for the purpose of this, I'm looking at you guys as those who are going, I'm gonna bite the bullet. I've already fought the battle of me, and I'm at least willing to get up there. And we'll say some more about keeping our motivation up. But let's say that we've decided we're going to try to get somebody to study. But what are some of the challenges to get somebody to say yes?
Time commitment.
Time, okay.
They've got to have a desire. They've got to have a reason why they want to sit down and study with me.
Okay. All right, what else do you think?
I think you guys spend enough time with them that they get to know you, because I'm not going to listen to somebody that is alien to me. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not scripturally opposed to door knocking, but I think I can make the case, and I'm willing to talk about it, that our most successful work on the whole is going to be in what we call warm contacts. People that we already have a relationship with, people that we already have influence with, people that trust us because we've earned that trust through trying to live the Christian life in front of them, and that it's important to us, and so there's some legitimacy, right? So that's a good point. Any other challenges you think we might face in getting somebody to study with us?
Some people have a bias against the church. You know, they'll accept the Methodist, Baptist. They'll accept anything else, but they don't like the church.
Okay, good. Is that fair? Prejudices? Okay. I think it's even broader than just the church, but we'll talk about that too.
I think for me, the elephant in the room is the courage to ask.
Good. And that's kind of goes back to what Bobby's saying, and so I think there's a place for that. The courage to get to that point, to where we're doing that. I mean, maybe, I think, as I look at this, that's probably the biggest one for me that I have to fight.
Biggest one.
The biggest challenge is to have the courage to say, will you study the Bible with me? And there's some people, doesn't bother them a bit. That's not an impediment for them. They're fearless. They're like, I'll ask anybody all day, every day. I'll make a poster. I remember one time, Dale and I went to a Georgia game a couple of years ago. And, I mean, this is back, if you can make yourself think pre-COVID, you know, where there's just throngs of people everywhere, and you're elbowing to try to get into Sanford Stadium, right? And as we're going through, there's a bridge right behind the scoreboard as you're coming in. And, I mean, I can't tell you, I mean, there's more folks, I'm one of the biggest crowds I've ever seen. And in the middle of that, not shaken, not fearful or afraid, is a guy with a poster saying, Lord's coming. You better repent, you sinners. I mean, it's stuff that was that you know, I don't think he's going to do a whole lot of good there, because he doesn't have a relationship with those folks. That people are just going to say, it reinforces some prejudices. Boy, somebody who claims to be a Christian, you know what they are. They're crazy extremists, like this guy right here, right? But a lot of us we don't have trouble relating to people. We have trouble taking that relationship toward a Bible study. See? Yes, sir.
I believe we could call that getting comfortable soul prep.
Right here? Yeah. Good. I think so.
think it's like soft evangelism. It starts with that soft evangelism where these topics come up, you know, maybe in conversation. We just kind of, you know, infiltrate our, you know, belief in there, and then there's that debate, and then that can lead to more of the
Yeah.
line.
So let's think about it. I mean, this isn't theoretical stuff, is it? What did the elders tell us to do last week? Invite somebody to the gospel meeting, right? 193 circumstances of what I'm talking about. And, I mean, it might not be, and there might be some of us that just have somebody picked out, and we can go up to them right now and say, hey, I want you to come to church with me on March 24th, or 21st. 21st. 24th is good too. That's the last day of the meeting. But I'm just, you know, somewhere during that time. But what can we do between now and then? What should we have been doing all along? Is, you know, you have opportunities to say, something comes up and go, you know, I was studying about that in my Bible the other day. Well, that's not, you're not slapping them in the face, are you? You're just saying, wow, I know what you mean, and here's what I've done. I in my own Bible study, this helped me. Or, you know, you could even say, if you want to, you know, the preacher preached about that recently at our church. I heard a guy in the prayer say this. You know, soft touch evangelism, but you put the plow on the ground, right? You're getting it all started. And there's wisdom in how we approach that. There are several challenges. Yes, ma'am.
This might fall under desire, but I was thinking about those who don't have appreciation for the authority of the Bible, and their Christianity is based on just a relationship they think they have with God or their feelings, and so they don't see the need to have the study in the first place.
Okay. I'm going to use a word in the way that Paul used it. It's not an insult. It's a biblical truth, and it's broader than what Kathy said, but it includes that. The people in Athens were very smart people, and yet when Paul says, and the King James says the truth, you know, in verse 30 it says, "In the times of this ignorance, God winked at." You know, all of us are ignorant about something. I've got boys who are very mechanically inclined. I'm a willing apprentice. I'm a grunt, but I'm ignorant about a lot of what it takes for a car to work, even at the most basic levels. It's just how things have shaken out for me. English may be something I'm ignorant of too, but anyway, we all are ignorant about something, right? But you know, with my oldest son, man, he knows a lot about a lot of different things, but he couldn't tell you, 3 positions on a football field, because that's just not, so he's ignorant about that. We're all ignorant about something. All of us are.
That's the hardest obstacle, I think, to overcome, is that when they don't respect God's word, I don't understand. I mean, we can't say, well, God says this, because
right.
they don't care.
And we're going to talk about some of that as we walk through. That ignorance may keep them from consenting to be in the study. And once we get in the study, that's got to be something that's embraced and appreciated, or we're not going to be able to take it to its conclusion, right? I think it was Gus Nichols, whenever he counseled with somebody, he said there's a few questions that you've got to be able to answer in affirmative. Do you believe the Bible is God's word? Do you believe it's God's word for you? Are you willing to do right now what he says to do? And if they couldn't answer yes to all those questions, he said, we're going to just waste all of our time together. Now, people's attitudes can change. They may feel that way now, but you can influence that. And so don't think, oh well, that's a deal killer. That challenge is just one it's unget-aroundable. It's not. I don't know that any of these are. Because our job is not to be soil detectors, right? We're soil cultivators. And we'll let God deal with the results of that. Now, you've given me some great answers. If you want me to, let me walk through some of them that I have, and it's going to probably cover most of what you've said. Number 1 challenge I think that we may face in trying to set up a study is initiating. Bringing up the subject. I always think about the door-to-door salesman, or the charities, or the Boy Scouts that are standing in front of Walmart. Whether they're coming to you or you're coming by them, or even if you're walking through the mall and somebody steps out, and says, "Hey, you want to try this?" Well, how do we respond to that?
Don't make eye contact.
Don't make eye contact. If you do, we did that the other day, didn't we? Last time we were at the mall.
Don't look out.
It was like, just that it just was something happened in our periphery. We looked, and it's like, oh man, as soon as you do it, the next 30 seconds. Right? So if somebody comes and knocks on your door, and you can see the piece of paper in their hand, what do?
Hi.
You're not home, right? The TV's blaring, and if you come across somebody who's selling something at the door, I don't recommend this. Have you ever seen somebody that's, hey, how you doing? We're trying to avoid confrontation. We don't want to be pulled into that. And so here's what we do. We think everybody's like that. Even the folks that we're starting to have a relationship with, we think that they're going to see us in that way. They're going to see us like the ones in the white shirt and the black tie, or the guys riding the bicycles, right? Or with the material. And so in our wanting to avoid being like that, we can find ourselves keeping our mouths closed. I read somewhere that Luke 9:21 is the most obeyed commandment in the New Testament. And he commanded them to tell no one. Keep it in its context, because that's not what that means, right? To me, there's not much difference between the discomfort if it's a cold or a warm contact. I think it's something that, it's, for me, I'm an extrovert. I don't have a hard time establishing rapport, talking to people about their interests, talking about sport. I'll hear I like people. And so, whatever they're drawn to, I'm trying to get to know them better. I'm gonna show interest, and I'm gonna talk about what they want to talk about. But something happens when I realize God wants me to use this opportunity to bring up the gospel with me. It's a challenge, but what's going to help us? How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, 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 right? That's like from the 1940s, but I heard that as a kid growing up. It's not you drive a certain direction. The only way to get to perform is you practice, practice, practice. All right. Larry West, I don't always quote him, but there's some good things in his book, Getting to the Point, the Gospel Point. What he says is challenging, but I think it's doable. He says, confronting takes technique. It takes method, system. It should be a simple technique, so simple that it would seem that there is no technique at all. But it must take procedure nonetheless. What is the procedure? Here it is. In a nutshell, number one, it first must be direct and straight to the point. Number two, it must be on the subject of one's personal salvation. And number three, it certainly must be peppered with kindness. If it falls short in these three qualifications, we will not likely convert the person. Now, I'm not going to say his name, but I want you to know that there was a guy in my adult life who was probably the most influential on me in the area of soul winning. This guy, in fact, he taught at the church where I preached. He taught the personal evangelism class, and he trained a lot of people on how to do that. He was fearless. He had a military and a law enforcement background, and he just, he was that guy. And he could get to the point, and he was willing to talk about salvation. And while I learned a lot from him, I learned not just about the how-tos, but I learned about the how-not-tos, because he was gruff, he was bullying, he was could be obnoxious, and so he closed some doors that others could have gone through. But I still got to tell you, he with that won many more souls to Christ than a lot of diplomatic folks who never bring up the subject. But we don't have to trade off. We can be direct, and that can be the hardest part. And we can talk about their salvation. We can do so with a kindness that is clearly transparent, that we love them and we care about them. We need to practice that technique of bringing up the gospel to those in need. I probably somewhere told the story of I will call his name, Hud Griffin. He was a lineman. He's mostly lived out west. I think he's from Tennessee originally, but he worked for the power company in various places. One of the most evangelistic people I've ever seen. Brian Anderson that the Smiths know in southern Mississippi would be one. There would be just about the same. But I was more closely associated with HUD for a lot longer, and He was in south of Albuquerque. He was out in California. I know a lot of folks that he's converted. And I asked him one time when I was getting ready to teach on evangelism, can you tell me the secret to your success? Because, I mean, the guy was always in multiple Bible studies, and he was getting them all the way through those. And I wanted a piece of that. You know what? He gave me this very complex formula. He said, I tell him, hey, well, if he didn't know him, because he would talk to people he didn't know, my name's Hud Griffith, but here was it. Would you like to study the Bible with me? I mean, that's Einstein and revolutionary right there, and that's complexity at its greatest. You need a formula to draw that out, right? Now, what did some people say to him? No. But, you know, a lot of people did say yes to it. After we do the work that we've been told about building that relationship and warming that up, there comes a point where we can say, would you like to study the Bible with me? Now, I've needed to do this more often than not, but I was in a drought some years ago, and I wanted to be in a Bible study with somebody, and so there was a girl that was a banker. Her name was a bank teller, or not sure what position she had, but her name was Jenny May. And I remember getting in my truck and driving from the church building. I went for that very purpose. Bank opened at 9. I was praying the whole way, God, please help me to have the courage to go through with this and help me not look like an idiot when I'm talking, you know. And I went in there, and they were just getting opening up for the day. It was on a Monday, and I said, hey, can I talk with you just a second? And she said yes. And I sat down with her at the desk beside the teller ledger, and I said, I've been praying for somebody to study the Bible with. Would you like to study the Bible with? Well, she started crying. And I thought, oh man, what have I done? She's going to get fired. I'm going to get kicked out of my bank, you know. She said, I've been praying for somebody to study the Bible with me. Now, what I ask myself is how many opportunities have I missed for somebody who may, here's what I believe. I believe Matthew 7, 7 and 8. If they're seeking, they're going to find. And if they don't give up, somebody's going to have the courage to talk to them. But you know what? I want it to be me. I want to be a disciple who Jesus can count on, who I will be looking for, the searchers. And I want to be the instrument that God works with, not for my glory, but because I'm His follower. And I'm saying that to hold me accountable to you and to encourage you along those lines. There are probably people in our lives, maybe we need to cultivate that relationship some more, but maybe we're at the point where we can just say, and maybe we don't know. Maybe we don't feel like we're capable of doing the study. But there are people who can. And if we can just get them to agree to the study, there's folks who we can connect them with to do that. Somebody had their hand up. Yes, sir.
I'm afraid that sometimes we give up before we really should. Most of us, we live in a fast-paced society. We want it now. We want to eat it now. We want to move on. But the gospel's not that way.
That's right. Well, in some sort, it takes longer to cultivate than others.
Well, I believe in the providence of God.
Yep.
And I believe God puts people in people's lives. He wants them there for a reason. I've had people in my life that I don't know why they were there. I know for a fact when we were building camp. If we needed an electrician, we got one. If we needed a carpenter, God found one. If we needed a stainer, a painter, God found one. And God puts people together to do His will. And sometimes we don't let God do His thing. God's in control of everything.
That's right. And you make a great point that I want you to keep in mind, and that is something Jesus says, and I think at least the first three gospel writers put it. He says, no, all four of them do, because John 4 is the place in John. Says, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, for they are white already unto harvest. Sometimes it's just a matter of us opening our eyes. The opportunities are there. He's already working through time and events, and He's put them right there And because he knows we're equipped, if we know God's truth about how to be saved and how to live the Christian life, then definitely that's one of the people he has on this earth to be fulfilling that purpose. And if we'll open up our eyes and look at it that way, that God in his providence is working to put people in our lives, it'll be amazing how much more frequently that happens. To take HUD and Bride for an example, how is it that Brian Anderson has 3, 4, 5 studies at any one time ongoing? This elder in the church, what does he do for a living?
He's some sort of engineer.
Okay, he's got a job, he's got a family, he's a hard worker, but he still is doing that. Those opportunities are not more abundant in southern Mississippi than they are in south central Kentucky. We've got to open up our eyes. Yes, sir.
Looking at this, in the business world, and more specifically in marketing and sales world, these are 3 distinct different skill sets. And they are oftentimes performed by 3 different people.
That's right.
And maybe what we need to do is get better at finding out which one of these people we are and team together. So if you're a getter, I'm not a getter. I'm an introvert.
Yep.
But I'm an introvert that's willing to stand up and preach and so forth, but I'm willing to do the doing and the closing, but I'm terrible at the getting. So maybe somebody else needs to do the getting because they're comfortable with that.
That's right.
Like I said, the guy that's just willing to go and, ask anybody at any time and then hand them off to somebody else to perform maybe we need to work at this as a team rather than just thinking that I've got to do all 3 and I'm scared to do 2 of them.
Dennis, that's a great point. And I
Talking
did.
about
Somebody
that
mentioned.
our first class.
Yep, that's right. Chuck Anderson, is that his name? Up in the Waterford, Michigan area, he wrote a book called Go Teach Keep, and I have it in my material that I'm going to teach here. Something I developed some years ago, but not near as smart sounding as what he said. But that if you look at the evangelism box, there are folks that get them up to the box. There's the folks that get them into the box, and then there's the folks that got to keep them in the box, right? And you don't have to be all of those. There are some people who know how to get people to say yes better than others. I don't know who you are. Don't dismiss the fact that you may be a goer, somebody who can get somebody to say yes. But it may turn out that that's not your greatest strength. And don't feel bad about that. Maybe you can walk them through. We're going to talk about the principles of a study as you walk through it. What do you got to do in order to properly set the foundation for a decision? But let me tell you, this is the most neglected part of the Great Commission right here. And that's something a whole lot more of us have got to be involved in, and that is, what do we do with that babe in Christ? I wrote an article for Gospel Advocate years ago about after the water dries what? And imagine, the idea is that a baby is born, and they put that baby in the newborn unit there behind glass, and there's that baby. Can you imagine not tending to it for a day? A week? It's criminal negligence. A lot of times we leave those babes to dry on the baptistry steps, and we never take care. We don't nurture them. We don't grow them. So Dennis's point is excellent. That is, don't feel like you got to handle all parts of this. Speaking to a class, like speaking to a congregation, you don't know where people's strengths lie. What I want you to do is grasp where you know yourself. Where do you excel? Where can you do? And maybe you have more than one of these skill sets. If you do, that's great. Use them all. But don't feel like you have to do all of them. In other words, don't feel like I got to be able to teach these folks. I don't know what their religious background is. They're going to ask me something. I'm not going to know the answer to it, and they're just going to eat my lunch, and the soul's going to be lost. It's going to be my fault. Don't put all that on yourself. Because maybe what you can do is have them over to your house and have fellowship with them and show them what Christian living looks like once they become Christian. Great points. A second challenge that we face in trying to set up a study, it's obvious that you need to hold on to these sheets because I'm not going to get done with this lesson today. But it's very foundational to what we're talking about. I think the devil has sold us on the idea that people aren't interested in the truth. I mean, look at the world right now. I mean, I don't know. I'm not asking where you are philosophically, but I don't care where you are. You got to be discouraged at the state of our nation. How we can't be civil. We can't be kind to one another. And a Christian may say, man, this is just, and I think there's some truth to it. It's the fruit of sin. Righteousness exalts a nation. Sin is a reproach to any people, and we're seeing the plants, the weeds of that growing up in all kind of different places. And maybe what we concluded is there was a time, you know, the church was growing like wildfire in the 1950s, and that's just because the world was a better place. Some of you may remember the 50s. It was, maybe there have been changes, but it's still the world, and most everybody that lived in the 50s and died went into the judgment unprepared to meet the Lord.
Bowling Green was called Little Chicago.
Little Chicago. I read that book. What was it? Towner, the lady that was killed in Elizabethtown, the horse lady. Huh?
The Gary West book.
Yeah, the Gary West book. I read that.
Yeah.
But a lot of that, I know that there are folks here who know some of the principal players involved in that. Man, that's some scary stuff. I'd say Bowling Green is a kinder, gentler place today than it was then. If you don't believe me, read Gary West's book. It's wow. But there's people interested. And it's not just our nation. There's other nations around the world where Christianity is growing like it never has. But there's plenty of people here. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You can go back and you can listen to a preacher 50 years ago, and it sounds like they're talking about something that's going on today.
That's right.
So it's like, it's right. I mean, it's the same thing, just things have changed a little bit.
That's right. The Christians in our mission will never run out of business. There's plenty for us to be doing. So what can dampen people's interest in wanting to study with us? What can keep them from wanting to? Priorities.
Conceited attitude.
Pride. Okay. All right, we can understand that. I think all of us wrestle with pride. If somebody were to approach us and say, hey, you've been doing this wrong. Not that's the way they would say it, but that might be the conclusion we draw. Hey, you've been doing this wrong. I don't like that. Don't tell me that. What else? What keeps people from being interested? Fear.
People will stay stuck in their familiar, uncomfortable for a long time. But the unfamiliar is the scary, then what? Now
That's
that
right.
I know something different, then
Comfort keeps people from being.
Yeah, so saying the same thing, man. This might be a bumpy rut, but it's my rut, and I know it, and I'm gonna stay there. And I don't care who you are. You don't like your life to be disrupted. You don't like to make changes. This is a good time to talk about this. This is the beginning of the year. I know you can't tell by looking at me. I need to lose a little weight, and it's uncomfortable because it means changing. It means I can't eat all the sweets I want to all day long. I never could do that. But I mean, if I want to lose a little weight, I can't do that. Or, man, I love me some red meat. Now, don't judge me. I am going to eat red meat. This only time this week I'm going to do that today. But I got to make changes. I got to cut back. I got to reduce the calories. Do you like doing that? A lot of you don't have to, but I mean, those of us that do, I'm not looking anywhere. I'm just saying if you do. It's hard because I'm an eye contact person now. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's some other area you got to change. You don't like to do it, right? Because it's uncomfortable. Understand that that's where people are, because you're asking them to change the biggest thing that there is. Be aware of that. How about they're content with life? Isn't it hard to establish need with somebody if they're financially doing well, if they feel emotionally they're doing well, if they feel, at least on the surface, relationally, they're doing well, in all these different areas, they're like, man, things are going my way. What do you say I need? And that's a problem we run into in Western culture because, compared to the rest of the world, man, we got it made. And it's hard for me from the inside the comfort of my home with my, everything I need to say I need. So that can be a challenge there.
One of the evangelism, the first thing we've got to do is work on ourselves.
You're right.
2 Timothy 2:15, study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman,
That's right.
not to be ashamed. So anytime we go to someone, the least thing we don't want to happen is for it to be our fault. If we present that to someone and they are happy in their life, something's coming. They're going to lose a wife. They're going to lose a child. They're going to go bankrupt.
Yeah.
And they might remember
Somebody
you
talked
wrote
to
it.
That's right. You are exactly right.
When you don't want to get discouraged either.
No.
We can easily get discouraged when people
There's a balance.
slam the door
That's
of
right.
their heart. And that's one thing you don't wanna do, is you don't wanna lose your own soul in it, because you are investing your love for the gospel.
Mhm.
And you love them enough that you want to share this beautiful thing with them.
That's right.
But our job is to plant the seed. We may never see it grow in our lifetime.
Yeah.
But I think that as long as we see the, not have tunnel vision, we see the big picture, that I'm gonna plant this seed, and I'm gonna nurture it with love. And if it grows in my lifetime, wonderful, but it may not.
And here's how I see the balance of that. We have the opportunity to be in the Word every day. And we need to capitalize on that, and we need to be growing all the time so that we are equipping ourselves. But understand, there's nobody omniscient on this earth. And so you're never going to know it all. If you're trying to work on that relationship, it's kind of, I kind of look at, maybe it's a bad analogy, in raising kids. Those of you who have finished that process, you look back on some of that and you go, oh my goodness. They're I mean, whether it's physically, a lot of different aspects. Socially, they made it to where they are despite some of my mistakes, not because of my brilliant, training. Kathy did, but I mean, there's me as a dad. So you think about how you do your best. You're always trying to grow, but you're always going to have shortcomings, and that helps with that process. But that's a great point. Yes.
I haven't found many places I can do this, but I disagree with you just a little bit. You don't ever quit raising your kids.
That's true.
And you don't ever, your life, people are in different places in your life. And just because they're not where you are, at the point you are in your life, doesn't mean they won't be there. And sometimes we give up on people and write them off. And, my father obeyed the gospel at 77, and I gave up on him. And your kids are the same way.
That's right.
You take them to the grave. I mean, you go to the grave working. There's not a spot where you get to retire at the church.
That's right.
And I think when we give up, that's what's wrong. We gave up.
Well, and here's the point. Influence is not an event, it's a process. So keep influencing. Don't stop doing that. Let me give you a couple other things here. I'd like to at least get through the first part of this. We'll see if we can. I doubt it. Yeah.
So what was B exactly?
What was A?
I put initiating.
Initiating, okay.
So what was B?
Interest and inclination. That is, people aren't interested. They're not inclined to want to get into study. That's a challenge to getting a study. They may feel content with life. They may feel that they're okay as they are. They may have, you're going to run into this a lot, they may have had a bad previous religious experience. I tried that once. Let me tell you, preacher ran off with all the money. There was a big scandal down at the church, or the guy who brought me to church turned out to be a big lying scoundrel, blah, blah, blah. You'll hear that kind of thing. You got to just, all you can do is just keep planting seeds of influence, right? They're overwhelmed by their problems. They can't see the gospel because they're wanting this quick fix right now, man. I can't, I'll get there soon, but you got to fix all my problems first. And that's that whole thing that you've heard people say this sometimes. Let me get everything in my life on track. Let me get everything just right where it needs to be, and then I'll seek the Lord. And you heard that old illustration about the dad who's wanting to read his newspaper, and his kid's pestering him. He wants to spend some time with him. There's a family illustration in that too. But there's, for the moment, there's a piece of his newspaper that he tears off. You know that illustration, right? Tears in a lot of different pieces. Kid comes back almost immediately with the paper. How'd you get that back together? He said, well, there was a picture of a man on the other side. When I put the man together, everything else came into place. And that's what it is. If people, we can get people to understand, if you'll put Christ, the man, you take care of that first, get that where it's supposed to be, everything else will fall into place. And that's something we need to remind ourselves of too, right? When we get discouraged. First bell. Okay. All right. Wayne Berger went to school with my dad, and he was a teacher at Bear Valley. And he would often say, our job is to plant the seed. We don't have to worry about the results. It's not profound, but it's true. People may not be interested now, but who knows? Maybe down the road they will, and your planted seed will play a part. Who milks cows in here or has experience with that? Okay. You ever had a cow with a cockleburr that got in its tail? And did you ever get hit with that as you're trying to milk? It feels like a cat of nine tails, doesn't it? And you know the discouraging thing about those cockleburrs, you familiar with how what's going on inside of there from a botanical standpoint? There's like as many as 12 different seeds in one of those little sticky things. And they're made in such a way, I think this is part of the fall, but that first year, that seed that falls off, it may be a drought, and it just dies. But next year, second seed falls off, and there's been some rain, and you get to keep cockleburrs on this earth, and it's going to keep happening because there's just too many seeds in there. It may not be ready now, but it will happen down the road. Now, positively speaking, you planted seeds. It may not germinate now, but if time comes when there's a need in their life, they remember who shared the gospel with them. Third, let me at least start this one. Improper motivation. That can be a challenge in getting a study. And maybe not so much as getting the study as it is letting it be a fruitful study. Because there's two things that mess with people's motivation in trying to study the Bible with folks. What do you think they are? What's two things that cloud our motivation? Maybe even generally speaking in life. So,
Trust.
Okay, yeah, and that's one of those, read the teacher's mind as he comes up with two random answers. How about this? Love and money. All right, so here's what's going to happen. Somebody, you may think that they show interest in a study, but really what they want is you to solve their material, their financial needs. And you may find out that at the end of the day, that's all there was. How does love an improper motivation? She won't marry me unless I become a member of the church. So I guess I better do this. Well, or my friend, I really like him a lot, and the best thing I can do is if I go to church where he does do what he did to become a member of that church, I'll do that. Now, it's not our job to try to ferret out what people's motivations are. Here's something I've learned. Somebody may initially be looking for a solution to their financial problems, and that may have been what really brought them in the first place. But as they grow in the Word and as they mature, then their motivation goes beyond just that. And how many of you, I know I asked the second question, I only asked the first question. How many of you were not a member of the Lord's church when you met your spouse? Are there any in this room? There's there's quite a few of you. I'm sure all you had the proper motivation. But you probably know, you probably talk to folks who your initial reason for even sitting down to study the Bible was because you were smitten by that other, the significant other. But something happened along the way, and I know people who were dating somebody and they were interested in them and they heard the truth, that relationship, but they're faithful decades later because they found something they've been looking for but hadn't been able to find. So don't get too worked out, a bit up out of shape over that. The other one, let me see if I got one more. Inconvenience. Inconvenience is another challenge to getting a study. Accommodating people's lives. You'll need gentle persistence and a little bit of wisdom. And this kind of goes back to what Dennis was saying a moment ago. There's not going to always be a convenient time, right? Felix says to Paul, call for, in a convenient season, I'll call for you. U.S. history author John Marshall said, someday is not on any calendar. So how do you overcome this potential challenge? Those who have a sales background will learn that that have learned along the way that if you say, hey, we need to get together sometime. Does that work? So how do you then, here's what you can do. What day works better for you, Tuesday or Thursday? Tuesday, I guess. Okay, well, what time of day, 7 a.m. or 9 p.m.? Well, 4 p.m. Oh, 4 p.m. Okay, well, I'll switch what I have going on so that I can accommodate that. See, people just, they need encouragement. You're not trying to trick them. You're trying to help make it easier for them to study the gospel. There are some challenges you're going to run into. We can overcome those through some of the things that we've seen, not originally with me. We're going to talk about challenges that we encounter in the study and closing the study next week. So if you can remember, bring those sheets back and we'll pick up right there. Thanks very much for your attention and your comments.